Great. Thank you, Jane, and thank you, the IFA, for the opportunity. It's great to be here and be online. So today, I'm going to talk about Aging 2.0 through the lens of the age-friendly environment, and give you a little bit of context to what Aging 2.0 is. And then specifically, I want to spend a little bit of time introducing a new concept we've just launched called the Aging 2.0 Grand Challenges. And this is really a way for us to focus the entire network and the community of innovators that we have developed in over 20 countries on sort of key topics, and double click on two that I think would be most interesting for this audience, specifically improving functional ability and enhancing age-friendly environments. And then I wanted to finish up by sharing just a few ways in which we can all sort of help to have innovation happening in our local communities and getting involved, and really showing that this is a bottom-up initiative. So with that, I'm just going to jump in, and I will I'll get started. We've got quite a lot to get through. Just a very quick background. We are used to seeing slides when it comes to sort of aging presentations around pyramids, and this one I like because it's not the standard aging pyramid, but it is something from the World Health Organization showing the speed by which populations are aging, and showing that it took France over 110 years to shift from 7% of its population being over 65 to 14%, and that shift is now much quicker happening in countries like South Korea, China, and Thailand in a much more accelerated way. And I think this is interesting as we think about the way that countries are aging. The solution that we at Aging 2.0 are taking is that this technology and startups are a very good way to catch up with the speed of innovation that is necessary as we're seeing this fundamental shift. So just sort of taking a step back, why does all this matter? And a quick story as to how this is relevant and what this means for individuals. And wanted to introduce June Fisher. June is somebody that we call our Chief Elder Officer, our CEO, and she's somebody who came into our offices a couple of years ago and said, "Hey, I know, see what you're doing around aging. I thought in the local paper, I want you to make sure that you always, include me when it comes to making solutions. Don't design, for me, design with me." And she said, "Look, I've got a very specific need. I want to go to the market and buy tomatoes that are in season at the local ferry building. And however, it's really hard for me to get around. I'm not very mobile." And so one of the things that we did then is we partnered up with Stanford University, who were running a design challenge, put the word out to the chapters and the students, and came up with ideas. And this is one idea that came from some local students to design a walker that would be both functional and fashionable, and would allow June to go to the store and then come back, but also look good. And it's very important that we have this element of it's got to look stylish as well as be functional. And this idea of introducing a new concept that, by the way, then won the competition and allowed essentially June to sort of get her wish of a really nicely designed walker that helps her get what she wants. So it illustrates a couple of things about Aging 2.0, which is bringing a broad network into play, and then focusing on quality of life of older people that can be improved with innovation design. And so our mission, Aging 2.0, is supporting innovators taking on the biggest challenges and opportunities in aging. And the way that we do that is we're building this international, interdisciplinary, and intergenerational network with many corporate members and many chapters in different countries. It's run as a for-profit company. We have a US base. We have local chapters run by volunteers because we are very much a social enterprise We very much believe in doing, for profit and for purpose, and this approach of combining sort of innovation, technology, design, but doing it for a social good is something that we're very excited about, and sort of building a community of people also interested in that topic. So very quickly, in terms of the way that we run, we have programs for our corporate partners and for our chapters, and we run a global startup competition that identifies companies and startups around the world doing really interesting work and elevates them onto the stage at a conference we call Optimize at the end of the year in November in San Francisco. So this idea of using the network, finding ideas from wherever they happen to be, is something that I think we can all benefit from, because it's happening in other areas. It's happening a lot of the crowdfunding models that we're seeing, where people develop these concepts and then get them funded and get them scaled. It's something that I think we're going to be starting to see in aging. And the good thing is there's so many people interested in the topic that want to help and get involved. We're now up to about 60 chapters in different countries, about 20 countries, and going at about one a week. And these chapters have the requirement to organize local events, get local volunteers involved, and in particular find out what's new and what's interesting in different areas. Because the good thing is that all the innovations that we see, they're spread around the world. There's no one center of innovation in aging. It's a universal approach, and I think this is why I think the IFA approach is so useful as well, that we really need to have a global conversation and create ideas and best practices and share perspectives from different people around the world. The conference at the end of the year, as I mentioned, is a way we gather the community to come together. And some of the partners, just to mention, the folks that are working together with us on the corporate side, are all focused on innovation from different perspectives, both from the aging and senior care world, but more recently, Procter & Gamble, for example, has just joined, and more in the sort of the B2C, the consumer side of things as well. So now I sort of wanted to get in and spend the rest of the time really exploring the challenges and in particular the focus areas around functional ability and age-friendly environments. So specifically, when we took a step back and last year and said, what are the most important topics of innovation in aging, the question that we asked ourselves is sort of, how do we sort of structure the environment to, more effectively create a way for everybody to access the ideas, innovators that are out there. And the good thing is that there's so many innovators moving extremely quickly, doing lots of things, but that is also quite overwhelming. And many of the partners that we speaking to, specifically people working in aging and senior care, were getting inundated with many companies coming in from different perspectives and saying, look, this is our idea. We want to have some new technology to improve engagement or improve cognitive, some tool for tracking people with cognitive decline or whatever it might be. And a lot of the time, people sort of speaking past each other. And so we developed the grand challenges based on two things. One was, what are the topics that are most interesting from the perspectives of improving the lives of older people? And so we did a lot of work with our chapters and our corporate partners and older people and our advisors, and identifying the topics that really potential to move the needle in terms of older people's quality of life. And then we also looked at the topics of what are the areas that are ways in which we can improve, we can have the innovators get involved, because there's some areas that are more conducive to startups and technologies, and others not so much. And so these 12 topics came out in a sort of set of iteration, sort of discussions. The way that we are putting them together really is to think about it in sort of three phases, if you like, in terms of innovation ambitions, where, on the one hand, we can sort of start off with more of today's care environment and improving care, the systems of care, and these sort of the caring topics around care coordination, helping people transition from, one care setting to the other, whether it's from in-home to a hospital, skilled nursing, rehab, keeping track for people, and also bringing the family in together. Care operations relate to, the mechanics of how the systems work, how staffing is done to be more effective, how we can improve medication management, which is one of the biggest concerns of people both living independently and also in communities. And then remote care delivery, how to sort of take best advantage of the new technologies that make it easier for people to connect. So, for example, we're seeing quite a few technologies around rehab using sort of three-dimensional sensors to keep people, to allow people to know if they're doing the right, the moves in the right way according to their rehab plan. Then on the sort of thriving side, this is really moving to where we want to enable sort of the next sort of generation vision, where aging itself is much more than which is often characterized as a medicalized condition, health focused, and really much more about a whole body, whole person topic. And so a lot of the issues here around connecting the social determinants of health, so moving people around communities, personal mobility, and also movement in around the towns and community in terms of transportation, connecting engagement and purpose. We consistently hear how important the social isolation is as a risk factor. And then the lifestyle and daily living are products and services designed to help people improve the quality of their life, and have a much richer experience, giving them autonomy and agency. And then on the reimagining side, we're really saying, look, there are some topics here that are really complicated and difficult and need to be addressed as a much more of a societal conversation, where we need to start saying, okay, how do we sort of change our approach as a society to get to rethink some of these quite complicated issues. So, for example, financial wellness, getting people to have conversations around financial security, financial planning, new sort of approach to working in later life, but also then having those conversations within the same context where people would have the healthcare planning conversation. The family caregiving strikes us as really important, where a lot of people are struggling to look after people in their homes and not necessarily getting the support, recognition that they need to do that to support them. And so we're seeing folks like ARP do a really good job of documenting the importance and the impact of this in the economy. And then we're seeing startups provide products and services that effectively support those people who are in need of additional help, in particular the caregivers themselves. And then the cognitive health and end of life, two very tricky topics. Obviously, haven't seen a lot in the way of progress around dementia, but there's a lot of innovation in the non-pharmacological approaches around cognitive health and dementia, and in particular on the music side and the pet therapy. And then end of life, a lot of need to kind of recreate sort of the pact that we have in society about agency and understanding people's wishes, planning, allow people to plan ahead of time, but also taking a lot of the inspiration from Atul Gawande's recent book to try and sort of rethink the way that we treating society, treating older people in society, and sort of resetting a lot of the way that we think about end of life, and essentially understanding conversations in a very different way that we've had before. So so from those sort of high-level topics, what we can do is then sort of pull out a few innovations that we're seeing that represent sort of novel breakthroughs, but also sort of bigger trends. And so in the functionality side, we're seeing a lot of people focus, develop new products and services that combine the form and the function. So a little bit like I mentioned earlier, where we've got people who come out with products that for the walkers that look good and also do their job. There's CarePredict and WiseWed, the two companies that providing trackers that look stylish, and people actually don't immediately feel like they are some sort of being given an ugly tracker that could be either they don't want to wear or they're embarrassed about wearing, and building sort of more fashion into this process. And I think we're seeing some really interesting concepts coming out of design students, and having younger people who are sort of design ethos active. It's been one of the things that the Stanford Design Challenge has done a good job in. This razor, I wanted to mention, it comes from Procter & Gamble. I'm not sure if the video, I can click it. I'm not sure if the audio will play, so I wouldn't necessarily, I don't think we'll watch it now, but it's a really powerful way in which we can, I just recommend that you look at that afterwards, that you, for the first time, P&G sort of is saying that nobody's designed a razor in the past for a caregiver. There's thousands of razors, but none of them are designed to improve, making it easier for caregivers to look after other people. And this is an indication of where a company like P&G is starting to say, you know what, this is a really important market. We've got an opportunity to create new products and services that help people, and position this not as just a one-off products and services, but not a one-off product, but a much broader approach to helping improve the business ecosystem more generally. The next sort of part of this, I wouldn't be able to talk about improving functional ability without mentioning the work that Amazon is doing around the Echo. A lot of people are excited for this as a new model for interactions to help older people get online, get connected, and have services delivered to them. So, this is, on the one hand, the Amazon Echo is a device that has an inbuilt speaker and voice interface. The new ones now come with a camera, and so you can drop in to people and see how they're doing. But the important thing is that we're seeing a bit of a parallel, like we saw with the Apple App Store, where there's now over 15,000 skills, which are the name for the apps for the Alexa, for the Amazon Echo, which developers are using, whether it's music side, whether it's podcasts, or whether it's weather, or even to control lighting around homes, where you have this much easier way to provide, get input information in and get information out. So we're starting to see people say, hey, Alexa, where are my keys? And then the keys will start to beep, or hey, Alexa, what's the weather like outside? Or hey, Alexa, turn down the lights. So this idea of bringing technology in a very person-centric way into the home, and then it's frankly getting rid of technology. And a lot of people have been trying with devices, with keyboards, and it's quite complicated. But actually, we're finding it easier to have people interact just with voice commands. And so we're going to be seeing a lot more these areas, things in that area. Robotics are well understood in terms of what we can how things we can potentially improve lives of older people and stay independent. Sort of three in particular that I thought worth mentioning. Catalia is a sort of person-centric device. It looks a little bit like a little person that is really focused on medication management. That's really the problem they're looking to solve, and they're partnering up with pharmaceutical companies to help make sure that people keep track of their medication in their homes. Intuition Robotics has just raised quite a lot of money, and they are about to launch sort of in Q4 this year, where it's a very sort of intuitive device that is a bit. Once you see sort of the video, it sort of reminds you of a person. It sort of combines, the features of the person. It has sort of a personality, and then it has a screen, so it interacts with it. And then somewhat so on Jibo, again, it's a device that has a certain cuteness. That's quite interesting. When people are testing these devices, they really get a sense of personal connection and emotional attachment to what is clearly a robot. It's not trying to look like a human, but this idea of having a device that is a robot that is starting to connect emotionally, I think is a breakthrough, and it's what we haven't seen up until now, where creating a sort of a social connection and having a robot that can be trusted, that can be, often we see people confide in robots and artificial intelligent agents quite more than they would to real people. I think it's going to be a useful way to extend the care setting and have people triage, for example, in terms of if there are concerns of people that can start to test by listening to the voice, whether somebody is, for example, Parkinson's. There's a Parkinson's test where you can tell by listening to the voice whether somebody is getting worse, whether they need additional support. There are artificial intelligent bots with the small cameras that can look at your face and facial recognition and actually tell if you're in pain or if you're lying to a question about did you take your medication. So it's quite interesting to see the way in which technology is going to be evolving. The other part of robots that's worth mentioning is just the slightly more pedestrian stuff around the house. House cleaning is being quite well known for a while, things like Roomba, but the way in which we can start to automate some of the tasks, even a dishwasher, to be considered a robot, where I think the trick for the industry and the innovators is to get rid of the boring things and allow family and the caregivers to do things that they are interested in and are good at, and not necessarily, people don't want to be spending all the time washing the floors when they go and spend an afternoon with their older relative, but sort of spending time in more engaging ways. And this, I think, is the direction that we're seeing with the robotics take us into the future. And then another one to mention is this trend that we're seeing around wrapping services around the individual. A lot of people, not necessarily old people, but all of us, as we're confronted with a large number of new products and services, people are saying, hey, we're going to help you stay independent and stay in your home, and we're going to automate your home, and we're going to give you smart curtains and smart lights and smart TVs. We quickly get into a very complicated, overwhelming system of remote controls and logins, usernames, passwords, and plugs. And the idea of creating a layer to bring all the different services together to allow people to more effectively manage the things that matter to them. I think is really interesting. Cubigo is a Belgian company that we know that is doing something similar, where the idea is that each person has a different set of needs. And I think this is what we're seeing some of the more interesting areas in innovation happen, where we're bringing personalized services to that individual. It's not just a one-size-fits-all where everybody gets the same product or the same service, but we're starting to see some personalization, and this really plugs into the mega trends around the baby boomers, and the baby boomers have always had things their way, and this is now the promise of technology, is to be able to deliver personalized services at scale and have people have whether it's local transportation, food delivery, handyman services, remote care, rehab, the services that they need brought together into an aggregated approach like this is something that I'm really excited about, and it's going to be going to see more of in the future. So moving into the age-friendly environments, and so this maps more to the livable communities challenge that we're exploring, and there's a lot of new innovations around personalized transportation. Obviously, Lyft and Uber have been doing a good job in creating on-demand personalized services. A lot of the time, though, it has been quite complicated to access them for older people, not just because they don't necessarily have the smartphone and download the app and connect the credit card and all those things, but just the sort of the physical act of managing the interface on the phone is also challenging. And so we're seeing a few companies. GoGo Grandparent is another one that allows people to just phone up in a regular basis on a telephone number, and then to for the service provider then to connect the services, either connect into Lyft or Uber, or provide additional service options. The other piece on the complexity for older people up until now is a lot of the drivers are necessarily designed for helping people get in and out of the car, don't necessarily have the skills or expertise or training. And so a number of these companies are giving dedicated training and support to help older people to get in and out of the car, for example, door-through-door service, rather than just sort of pick up and drop off. So this kind of gives people a whole new set of options to, excuse me, to allow them to connect and be more active in the community. And then similarly, beyond just transportation, we're seeing services joining together. So, for example, Lyft has done a partnership with CareLinks, which is a platform to provide carers, family caregivers, and it allows the family caregiver to call a Lyft or call a car from within the app itself, and so it's much more integrated. And this idea of combining services and partnering up with different services to allow people to have more of the sort of social determinants of health, their needs met, is something that we're seeing quite a bit. Meals on Wheels is starting to partner up. They're doing a pilot project out in Baltimore where they are collaborating with case managers and people delivering. For them, it's a more than a meal. They have sort of social engagements, and they have food delivery, and then they also have a case manager to have an oversight and see if they can tell if something is going on, if something needs to be done. And so together we're creating a much more joined up approach of what the needs are of people and what are the service providers that can then meet those needs, again, in a personalized way. I wanted to mention the new models for living that we're seeing. So a couple in particular, Silver Nest and the Freebird Club. Freebird Club's out of Ireland, Silver Nest is in Colorado, where they are allowing people to, essentially it's an Airbnb model designed for older people. But the thing about this is that it's more focused and tested, or the interaction is based on older people. The interface is much more designed and friendly for older people, and then the service environment, the service experience is more social and allows people to connect with each other. Again, sort of, addressing the social engagement and isolation piece. Room to Care down in Florida, something similar, but a bit more focused on sort of disrupting the assisted living model. So it's a smaller size, like an assisted living, but providing some care and services as well at a lower price point. And then Minka is the new offering from Bill Thomas, who was the founder of the Greenhouse Project, who's developing these sort of small homes that can be clustered and can have technology and health services delivered to them, that are much more manageable for people to live independently, and then have caregivers provide services to them as needed. And then the social and intergenerational living, I think we're seeing, I thought this picture was quite cute, where it's happening around the world. The Dutch seem to be at the forefront, but lots of different models are emerging where we can see more people opting to live intergenerationally. The benefits, obviously, on the student side, that they get a much lower rent, but they also then get to interact with older people and people sort of beyond their sort of traditional social circles, and then older people again, find it more interesting and engaging. So this is, I think, a model where we're seeing more people can do this on an ad hoc basis, but I think this is recognition that today's model of senior care can result, if we're not careful, with sort of ghettoization and stigma and people being separated. And I think we're seeing a lot of logic in bringing new models of city center living, people working, living together in a community, in an urban environment of all ages, interacting with each other, and so both sides benefiting from that shared experience. And then finally, on the family caregiver side, we're seeing new tools and services to help family caregivers. Unforgettable.org is a company out in the UK that is the first one that's created a retail presence for products and services for caregivers, people with dementia, and has curated a group of products that are specially designed and validated, and then people have a community site so they can discuss the topics and they can discuss the key issues. And then the sites like Daughterhood is one in the US, where providing services and support for caregivers, and personalized emails, there's tips and tricks, there's ways in which we're seeing more recognition and support of caregivers as a vital part of the economy and the role of keeping people independent in their communities, and so making age-friendly environments more than just about the older adult themselves, but a much sort of broader, it takes a village approach. So, excuse me. So, the final then, I wanted to leave some time for questions, is ways to get involved. So really, there's a whole opportunity where we can sort of have individual events. There's local chapters, as I said, there's about 60 people can get involved there. We would love to hear about needs that older people have. If you know about an unmet need that we think that could be elevated to get startups involved, it's really interesting. It's always good to hear what people need, and it's always good then to test ideas in older adults. So people, in my experience, love to get engaged and to test new ideas and provide feedback. Chief elder officers, I think almost every company should have one or two or three, because they are ways to make sure we are designing with, not for. We at Aging 2 are having an event in Taipei in October. It's our first one in Asia, and our big event in San Francisco. So opportunity to connect with others, and then really sort of just have an opportunity to get engaged with startups, and building that bridge between startups and old adults. It's not something that we have the monopoly on. Everybody can do it and get engaged, and it's a really interesting opportunity to connect these two worlds that haven't necessarily been put together before. So I think with that, I will sort of turn it back to Jane, open it up for questions, and see if there's any questions at this stage.
Thanks very much, Stephen. That was a great presentation. I will get the questions started by inviting my colleague Kate McRae to ask a couple of questions. Kate, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thanks very much, Jessica. I guess the first question that I have for you, Stephen, was I found it really interesting when you're talking about all the transportation options that are currently becoming available for older people. However, I was just wondering, have you heard of many that are offering any special options for people with mobility devices like walkers or wheelchairs? Because I know, at least here in Toronto, most of the cab companies do have larger vehicles that can accommodate those kind of things, but I didn't know if you knew of anything like Lyft that are offering those options for people.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so far, there's been a bit of a, I think, middle ground that hasn't been filled, where you have the expensive, slow-moving transport, community-provided transport, which does have those options, but then so far it hasn't been a big focus on from the companies like Lyft and Uber. But I know for a fact that that's changing. I think they're starting with sort of sensitivity training and coaching the drivers. I think one of the things is it's about the cars and what cars are available in terms of when something is able to be used for wheelchairs. But I don't know if they've rolled it out yet. But I know that some both Lyft and Uber have options where you can pick I don't know if they rolled it out in all cities. I know it's available in some cities, but you can pick certain cars that only that have the ability to take a wheelchair. But it's coming. But I think it's one of those things that, again, it's a benefit to be in a big city, whereas I think the challenge that we get is living in rural areas where you may not have these on-demand services. This is just not the numbers. We're seeing Centennial, Colorado, just did a recent test where they were providing support for people to use Lyft to help to get them to the local, if they weren't near a tram or a train station or a bus stop. And I think that, to me, is quite an interesting area where once we get the cities involved to say, hey, you know what, we can start to guarantee a certain number of rides or provide a source of demand, then companies like Lyft and Uber and Envoy, which is a another startup, and others will go, you know what, it's actually worth us making the cars available, and this is when the cities can say, you know what, we need a certain percentage of them to be suitable for taking wheelchairs and to have solutions for people with more with higher acuity needs. And so I think there's actually a really interesting opportunity for us, as the community, to have conversations saying, yeah, sure, we'll support that and we'll provide some solutions, but you need to also, as companies, deliver, and I think the market will then respond. And I think right now there hasn't been a good interface, good discussion between those providers and the needs of the community, and I think that will change.
Okay, thank you. We actually have a question from Dr. Barrett now. She asked, so you've been talking about all these really wonderful technological advances, but Dr. Barrett was wondering, can technology detract from a person's need and wish to maintain their own personal well-being, in your opinion?
Yeah, totally. And I think that happens at all ages. I don't know about you, but I find when I'm on Facebook, I lose hours, and then I end up sort of being more miserable at the end of it. And so I think it's quite a difficult balance. I think up in the past there's been quite a few people. I remember a large technology company when I was working in the mobile world about 10 years ago was testing a new. They're very excited about their new connected photo frame, which would allow older people to have a photo frame that would then the family members would pop up and communicate by photo frame. And so there's still startups that are doing things like this. And what they discovered when they tested it out was that family members would then visit less often because they go, oh, we'll just do a virtual drop-in. And that I think would be dangerous because, obviously driving more social isolation. So I think technology is always neutral. It's how we implement it. I'm more excited about the technologies that can be helpful to nudge us in the right direction. So, for example, let's have technologies that show when somebody is not being active or they are potentially at risk of being isolated, or sort of essentially let's get technologies that are doing the stuff that we don't want to do to allow us to have time to do the things that we do want to do. So I think there is room for high-tech, high-touch solutions, but the way we need to address that is make sure that the technologies are designed with the older adult, and not for us to think that there's going to be one solution for everybody, because that's never going to work.
Thank you, Stephen. Okay, we have an attendee question. The question is, what role do you see for research, both basic and applied, in innovation in aging?
Yeah, that's a great question. We just had at the IAGG, I suspect many people on the line would have been at that event in San Francisco, where we worked with them and with AgeWell and a few other organizations to run a pitch event. And these were startups that were looking for collaboration with academic organizations to sort of test their ideas and essentially to have a more robust conversation a lot of the time about the ROI. Most of the startups that we're tracking about 3,000 startups around the world, and we have seen the startups. It's quite easy for them to create a concept, to put a nice PowerPoint slide deck together, and then maybe raise a bit of funding and to create a prototype. But what we haven't seen yet is enough really interesting startups of scaling up beyond the initial pilot stage. And here I'd sort of shout out to AgeWell, again in another Toronto-based company organization where they're doing a really good job of making that connection, and they're using a very rigorous academic approach to say, okay, does this work A bit like in a way, we saw drugs and the pharmaceutical approach sort of went through a bunch of research, figured out what works, what doesn't. I think there needs to be it's not going to be, we don't want to spend $1 billion to do research to launch a product because we know that it works in every scenario. But I think there's a bigger role to play for the researchers to help validate ROI and validate impact and effectiveness. To provide also be really helpful would be to do a repository of sort of what works. We're seeing people get stuck again and again doing the same things that have not worked in the past, and I think we could do a better job of sharing perspectives of making sure we know what works and what doesn't. And then one more thing I think would be interesting would be to realize that a lot of the things that are going to be impacting the lives of older adults are what I sort of mentioned here around the social determinants of health, where it's not just one intervention, it's not just food delivery, but it's food delivery with social connection, with remote care, with a handyman that can improve the life, make sure there are no throw rugs or there's the banister needs fixing. And what I haven't yet seen on the research side or academic side is a good way that we can sort of wrap all these interventions up and then test the effectiveness of them as a whole, rather than just saying, wouldn't it be good to just isolate the impact of delivering a pet cat for somebody to improve their themselves when they are the quality of their life, somebody with dementia, but actually say, this is all part of a system. And I'd love for the academics to help us think through how we can more effectively measure systems change rather than just individual interventions.
Great, thank you. The next question is also from one of the attendees, and it's in a for-profit company, how do users afford innovations such as the ones you've been talking about?
Yeah, so I think maybe the question more about how to, the costs of some of these new technologies. And I think there's two pieces. One is, us as a for-profit company, the approach that we take is we want this to be a scalable approach. We don't want to have to rely on government funds or foundation funds. We want to actually be self-supported, and that's the way that we get our funding from corporate partners who are interested in what the innovations are around the world, and so they pay membership fees, and that's where we get most of our money. The individuals who have access to, for some of these things, obviously, these robots and Amazon Echo costs $179. It's not cheap. But I think the good thing is that we see that technology itself is getting cheaper and cheaper all the time. The approaches that we're taking are still being validated. So, for example, sensor networks are getting cheaper and cheaper. The data that they're getting is getting more and more accurate. And so we're in that stage where right now a lot of these things are being tested out, and they're sort of shiny, like we see here, or they are still an edge case. But going back to the previous question, if we can start to prove the ROI, then the return on investment in investing in some of these things, I think we can be really interesting, especially around the health care system, where if you think about it, the potential, especially in the US, there's McKinsey and others estimate that to be around $1 trillion of the $3 trillion of healthcare is spending is either waste or spent inefficiently or could be avoided. And I think that's where I would like to see the main market come from. In terms, I don't want older people without much money to be spending their money on spending their savings on dubious technology that hasn't been validated. I would rather the healthcare systems spend the time to go, this is really going to make an impact. If we wire up people's homes, we have smart homes we have or engaged older people, we are going to predict earlier if there's health issues. We're going to get people help more quickly, and we're going to save money. I think that is a big area where we need innovation, we need smart thinking, and it's going to be as an outcome of the impact of health interventions that will be saving significant amounts of money. Then there will be new models. So from Australia, I know is testing out consumer budgets where they're starting to give money to individuals, and I think that will encourage the industry to be innovative, to show how they should be the ones to take that money that the government is giving to individuals in order to improve their lives. So I think the onus is on us as innovators to make the case that this money is well spent, and not for older people to invest their hard-won and limited savings on technology that hasn't been proven.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. So this one's also from one of the attendees, and it's from someone in Taipei who asks, how can startups in the East connect with others elsewhere?
Mm-hmm. Well, Taipei is actually perfect because we have a chapter in Taipei, and if you go to the website aging2.com/local, you'll be able to see all the different chapters, and they are, the web is a good way to connect to just see the different chapters we have right now: Adelaide, Shanghai, Tokyo, Bangkok, Singapore, Beijing, Taipei, Hong Kong, Tel Aviv, our Asia Pacific chapters. And then, I'm happy to also make connections if people want to send me an email, and we'll connect them on with Stephen at aging2.com.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Barrett for a couple of closing remarks.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Stephen. In closing, I want to reinforce and thank the World Health Organization, IFA and WHO working in partnership to deliver these important webinars. Stephen, across the course of your presentation, you helped us understand, what Aging 2.0 is all about. But I think it really is just the beginning. It's the beginning of a conversation that we in the field of aging need to be having with you guys in the field of technology and startups. It seems to me that, we are beginning to understand how technology can interplay with the person's functional ability. But I don't think we're sophisticated enough yet to appreciate, how to measure the impact of this. One of the other areas that you talked about was around the public-private sector partnerships and, making the case. And I think it's very important for us not to be able to only make the case, the business case, but what is the case for socialization. I think what came through to me also was, and you mentioned it several times, it was the technology and the human element. And that's one of the things that IFA really feels very strongly about in knowing and promoting the work of Aging 2.0. It's not just about the technology. It's about the user. It's about the older people informing the development. And it's also about how the technology and people around the technology can work to optimize the functional ability of the older person. In closing, I want to thank you once again, Stephen, for making the time and being open, to being part of this webinar series. One of the IFA's signature actions is to bring unlike together. And by bringing someone of your background and skills to the conversation, I know that many of our people on the call today will want to reach out to you and Aging 2.0. So thank you very much for your time. And to all of those attendees, thank you. I understand that the webinar will be recorded. So I wish you all well, and thank you very much for being part of this important webinar today.